Hollywood in 1967 looked glamorous on the surface, but behind the cameras, millions of dollars were quietly vanishing. How did massive productions with legendary stars turn into financial nightmares almost overnight? Some of these films had enormous budgets, huge marketing campaigns, and the full power of major studios behind them. Yet audiences simply stayed away. Today, we're uncovering 13 movies that became Hollywood's most painful mistakes, including one disaster so costly it nearly changed how studios made films forever. The Tiger Makes Out, 1967. On paper, the idea sounded like a charming, offbeat romantic comedy. Eli Wallach, a respected and versatile actor, would play a lonely New York man whose fascination with a mysterious woman leads him into increasingly awkward situations. The premise promised quirky humor and urban charm, but when The Tiger Makes Out reached theaters in 1967, audiences didn't quite know what to make of it. The film leaned heavily into uncomfortable humor and strange character behavior that felt more unsettling than funny. Wallach's character spends much of the story obsessively following a woman he barely knows, a concept that made many viewers uneasy rather than amused. Critics were divided, with some praising Wallach's committed performance, while others questioned the film's tone and storytelling choices. The marketing campaign struggled to explain what kind of movie it actually was: romantic comedy, psychological satire, or something stranger. Without a clear audience and lacking strong word of mouth, ticket sales quickly slowed. Instead of becoming a memorable urban comedy, The Tiger Makes Out quietly slipped through theaters, becoming one of the overlooked financial disappointments of its year. The Busybody, 1967. Crime comedies were extremely popular during the 1960s. Studios believed audiences loved stories about small-time criminals, mob bosses, and chaotic misunderstandings. The Busybody tried to capitalize on that formula. The film starred Sid Caesar as a loyal mob accountant tasked with transporting the body of a murdered gangster. The problem begins when the corpse suddenly disappears, forcing Caesar's nervous character into a frantic search before the mob discovers the mistake. The concept had potential for dark humor and escalating panic. But when the film arrived in 1967, it struggled to find its rhythm. Much of the comedy depended on frantic shouting and exaggerated reactions rather than clever storytelling. Critics noted that the pacing felt uneven, with long stretches of dialogue slowing down the comedic momentum. Audiences expecting a sharp crime comedy instead found a film that felt oddly dated even for its time. Without strong reviews or memorable scenes driving excitement, the movie failed to attract large crowds. What was intended as a lively mob comedy ultimately became one of the quieter commercial misfires of the late 1960s. The President's Analyst, 1967. Few films from 1967 were stranger than The President's Analyst. The story follows a psychiatrist suddenly appointed as the secret therapist to the President of the United States. Overwhelmed by paranoia and constant surveillance, he eventually begins running from intelligence agencies, spies, and corporate conspiracies. What begins as a political satire quickly spirals into a bizarre Cold War thriller filled with absurd twists. The film attempted something ambitious. It blended comedy, political commentary, and science fiction into a single unpredictable story. Unfortunately, that bold mix confused audiences. Viewers expecting a straightforward comedy instead found themselves navigating a complicated conspiracy plot. Meanwhile, those interested in political satire were surprised by the film's increasingly surreal direction. Critics admired the film's originality, but questioned whether the tone was too chaotic to fully work. Without a clear marketing identity, the movie struggled to attract large audiences. Over time, The President's Analyst developed a cult following among fans who appreciate its strange humor and paranoid storytelling. But during its original theatrical release, its unusual style made it a commercial disappointment. Caprice, 1967. By the mid-1960s, spy movies were everywhere. The global success of the James Bond franchise had convinced Hollywood studios that audiences couldn't get enough of glamorous secret agents, high-tech gadgets, and international intrigue. 20th Century Fox hoped Caprice would ride that wave. The film starred Doris Day as an industrial spy caught in a corporate battle between rival cosmetic companies. Mixing espionage with romantic comedy, the movie aimed to deliver a light-hearted alternative to the darker Bond-style thrillers dominating theaters. But when Caprice premiered in 1967, the result felt strangely out of sync with the moment. Audiences expecting exciting spy action instead received a playful comedy filled with elaborate disguises and corporate espionage jokes. Critics argued that the film struggled to balance its tone. It wasn't thrilling enough for spy fans and not funny enough for traditional comedy audiences. Despite Doris Day's star power and bright production design, the movie never built strong momentum at the box office. Instead of becoming another spy-era hit, Caprice faded quickly from theaters, joining the growing list of costly misfires during Hollywood's transitional late 60s period. A Guide for the Married Man, 1967. With a cast filled with recognizable names and a concept built around modern relationships, A Guide for the Married Man seemed perfectly designed for success. The film starred Walter Matthau as a happily married man, suddenly introduced to a group of friends who proudly share their secrets for cheating on their spouses without getting caught. Structured almost like a series of comedic lessons, the movie presents exaggerated scenarios where various characters attempt elaborate schemes to hide their affairs. On paper, the format allowed for endless comedic possibilities. But when the film reached theaters in 1967, reactions were mixed. Some viewers appreciated the film's satirical look at marriage and social hypocrisy. Others found the premise uncomfortable and the humor uneven. Critics were particularly divided, one with some praising Matthau's natural comedic timing, while others felt the episodic structure prevented the story from building real momentum. Although the film did generate curiosity due to its provocative theme, the expensive production and large ensemble cast meant expectations were high. Ultimately, its box office performance fell short of those expectations. What was meant to be a bold comedy about modern relationships ended up becoming one of the year's more disappointing financial results. The Ambushers, 1967. Dean Martin's Matt Helm series had once been a reliable source of box office success. Blending spy adventure with playful humor, the earlier films attracted audiences who enjoyed a lighter alternative to the intense seriousness of James Bond. But by the time The Ambushers arrived in 1967, the formula was beginning to show its age. In this installment, Martin's suave secret agent is assigned to recover a stolen flying saucer developed by the United States military. The story quickly moves through glamorous locations, elaborate gadgets, and a collection of eccentric villains. The ingredients seemed familiar. Perhaps too familiar. Critics argued that the film relied heavily on recycled ideas from earlier spy comedies. The humor felt predictable, and the action sequences lacked the excitement audiences had come to expect from the rapidly evolving spy genre. Viewers who had once enjoyed the playful tone now found the formula repetitive. As the decade moved toward grittier and more experimental filmmaking, the lighthearted Matt Helm adventures began to feel outdated instead of continuing the series' success, and The Ambushers became a clear sign that the franchise was losing its momentum at the box office. The Way West, 1967. During Hollywood's golden decades, large-scale Western epics were among the most dependable attractions in theaters. Studios believed audiences would always respond to sweeping landscapes, wagon trains, and heroic frontier stories. The Way West attempted to deliver exactly that. Based on the novel by A.B. Guthrie Jr., the film follows a group of settlers traveling across the American frontier toward Oregon. Along the journey, they face harsh weather, internal conflicts, and the brutal realities of pioneer life. The production assembled an impressive cast, including Kirk Douglas, Robert Mitchum, and Richard Widmark. With major stars and expansive outdoor locations, as the film looked like a prestige Western designed to dominate the box office. But when it opened in 1967, the reception was surprisingly lukewarm. Audiences had begun shifting toward newer, more cynical westerns that challenged traditional heroic storytelling. Compared with those emerging styles, the Way West felt somewhat conventional. Despite its impressive scale and star power, the film struggled to generate excitement. The result was a costly production that failed to deliver the large ticket sales studios once expected from epic Western adventures. The Happening, 1967. Crime comedies were a risky balancing act. When they worked, they could combine suspense with humor in a way that audiences loved. But if the tone slipped even slightly, the entire story could feel confusing. The Happening attempted to walk that line. The film stars Anthony Quinn as a powerful mob boss accidentally kidnapped by a group of inexperienced young criminals. The kidnappers quickly discover that holding a gangster hostage may be far more dangerous than they expected. The premise offered clear comedic potential, but the execution left many viewers unsure whether the film was meant to be a serious crime story or a full comedy. The pacing often slowed during scenes that seemed unsure of their tone. Some moments played as slapstick humor, while others leaned toward darker crime drama. Critics pointed out that the film never fully committed to either direction. Despite Quinn's strong screen presence and a promising setup, the movie struggled to attract consistent audience interest. Instead of becoming a memorable crime comedy, as The Happening quietly disappeared from theaters, leaving behind a disappointing financial result for its producers. The Night of the Generals, 1967. War thrillers had long been a reliable genre for Hollywood studios. With major stars and dramatic wartime settings, these films often attracted both critical attention and strong ticket sales. The Night of the Generals seemed to have all the right ingredients. The story follows a military investigator attempting to solve a murder connected to several high-ranking German officers during World War II. As the investigation unfolds, suspicion slowly falls on powerful generals within the Nazi command structure. The film featured an impressive international cast including Peter O'Toole and Omar Sharif. The combination of mystery, war drama, and psychological tension promised a gripping experience. However, when the movie premiered in 1967, audiences responded with mixed enthusiasm. Some critics praised the film's atmosphere and performances, while others felt the pacing slowed the suspense. The film's ambitious production also carried a large budget, increasing the pressure for strong box office returns. When ticket sales failed to match expectations, the project became one of the year's notable financial disappointments. Despite its strong cast and intriguing premise, The Night of the Generals struggled to turn its dramatic story into commercial success. Casino Royale, 1967. Few films in the spy genre were as chaotic or as ambitious as Casino Royale. Instead of producing a straightforward James Bond adventure, the filmmakers decided to create a massive parody of the entire spy craze. The result was a project so unusual that it ended up being directed by multiple filmmakers and starring an enormous ensemble cast, including David Niven, Peter Sellers, Ursula Andress, and Orson Welles. The story itself became almost secondary to the spectacle. The film jumps between absurd scenarios involving rival secret agents, elaborate casinos, and increasingly surreal comedy sequences. During production, creative disagreements and shifting scripts created a famously complicated filming process. The final movie felt less like a single story and more like several loosely connected sketches. Audiences were curious about the film's enormous cast and extravagant production design, but curiosity alone could not overcome the film's staggering budget. Now, despite reasonable ticket sales, the huge production costs made financial success difficult. Instead of becoming a triumphant Bond parody, Casino Royale turned into one of the most expensive and chaotic cinematic experiments of the decade. Camelot, 1967. Broadway musicals had delivered enormous success for Hollywood during the 1950s and early 1960s. Studios believed adapting famous stage productions into lavish films was a safe financial strategy. Camelot was expected to follow that tradition. Based on the beloved stage musical about King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and the Knights of the Round Table, the film promised romance, spectacle, and elaborate medieval settings. Warner Brothers invested heavily in the production, constructing massive castle sets and elaborate costumes designed to recreate the mythical world of Camelot. The cast included Richard Harris, Vanessa Redgrave, and Franco Nero. Yet when the film arrived in 1967, the cultural landscape was shifting rapidly. Audiences were beginning to gravitate toward more modern and experimental filmmaking styles. Compared to those emerging trends, Camelot felt like a grand production from a previous era. Although some viewers admired its visuals and musical numbers, the film's enormous production costs made profitability difficult. Instead of becoming a major triumph, the movie's financial performance fell far short of expectations. Dr. Doolittle, 1967. Few productions in the 1960s became as infamous behind the scenes as Dr. Doolittle. But the musical adventure starred Rex Harrison as the eccentric veterinarian who could speak with animals. Based on the popular children's books, the film promised a colorful fantasy filled with songs, exotic locations, and talking creatures. But the production quickly became a logistical nightmare. Filming with large numbers of animals created endless delays. Some animals refused to cooperate, while others required complicated training and transportation. As the schedule stretched longer and longer, the budget began rising dramatically. The studio invested enormous resources into marketing the film as a major family spectacle. Yet when audiences finally saw the finished movie in 1967, reactions were mixed. Many critics felt the film was too long and uneven in pacing. Despite receiving Academy Award nominations, the enormous production costs meant that even moderate ticket sales could not cover the investment. The result was one of the most famous financial disappointments of the decade. In Like Flint, 1967. During the mid-1960s, spy comedies were everywhere. Hollywood believed audiences couldn't get enough of stylish secret agents, exotic locations, and outrageous gadgets. That trend helped launch the Derek Flint series, starring James Coburn. The first film, Our Man Flint, had been a success, so the studio quickly rushed a sequel into production titled In Like Flint. This time, the ultra-confident secret agent faces a bizarre threat, a secret organization of women planning to control the world using advanced technology and weather manipulation. The idea promised playful satire and larger-than-life adventure. But when the film reached theaters in 1967, the excitement around spy spoofs was beginning to fade. Audiences had already seen numerous imitators of the genre, and the formula no longer felt fresh. Critics noted that the sequel repeated many of the same jokes and stylistic tricks from the first movie without adding much new. Despite Coburn's charismatic performance, the film struggled to recreate the original's success and delivered disappointing box office results. Hollywood's golden age wasn't built only on legendary successes. Some of its biggest productions collapsed in spectacular ways. These films had famous stars, massive budgets, and enormous expectations, yet audiences simply walked away. Sometimes one wrong decision can cost millions. And the most surprising part? A few of these disasters later became cult classics. Which one shocked you the most?